Guys, it's currently 1:40 a.m. We don't have time for a funny intro. Just enjoy the video. Hello everyone, my name is Borax the Mighty, and I've been on a mission to find out what is the strongest champion in League of Legends. Now, while I acknowledge this is an impossible task, I have been cooking up a few methods. The first way is by finding out what the champion mains think about their own champions, which is what this video will be going over. The second way is by taking a look at champion win rates, which leads to the third way, which combines the two to create the BTMS, which I'm still working on and will be talked about in a future video. Let's go back to finding out what champion mains think about the characters they like to play, and if you believe this is useless information, then that's completely fine with me, and here's the end of the video for you. Okay, now while I agree it might not be the most reliable information, I definitely think it's very interesting and entertaining, and more useful than I originally thought. Let's quickly go over how I obtained this information. I attempted to contact all 163 champion subreddits so I could ask them this poll. I got responses from 156 subs, and these are the following champions that I wasn't able to get responses from. Also, any champion that has an asterisk by its name, remove my poll so they might not be the most reliable. If you want to know what happened with any of the subreddits, then check out my last video as I dove into it all there. After a week of voting, we were able to gather 71,809 votes, and I want to say thank you to everyone who has participated. I couldn't have done this without you guys. Now once I received those, I weighted the responses with S's being 6 points, A's 5, B's 4, C's 3, D's 2, and F's 1. This let me get an average score, and just like that we were able to rank the champions. I also use this little range to give each champion ranks so that we can make some tier lists. If you want to look at any of the information yourself, I will include links in the description to the 2 Excel sheets that I have been updating. One of them is pretty much all completed and looks pretty nice, and the other one's a bit more of a fiasco as I've been working on it to try and perfect the BTMS scale, so be warned, it is currently in progress, but all of the raw data is there if you are interested. Now that we've gone over all that explaining, let's take a look at some of the things I found interesting. Also, if those explanations were too fast, then feel free to check out this video, which goes over explaining the whole process a bit more in depth. So, let's just simply answer the question, who do champion mains think is the best champion? Well, it's actually really close, but Kha'Zix ended up being number 1 with an average score of 5.23, and Gragas came in second with an average score of 5.22. Now these are both junglers, and they both take the 1 and 2 spots on the list. And third, we have Milio at 5.12, Kog'Maw is tied at 5.1.2 but slightly lower. Then we have our second ADC at Zeri, who gets a 4.93. We have our third jungler in Rengar, who got a 4.91. Our fourth jungler in Ivern, who got a 4.88. Jhin is our third ADC, who got a 4.84. In ninth, we have our first top laner in Malphite, who gets a 4.81. But be careful, his results were maybe not the most reliable as I didn't get the most votes from that subreddit. And finally, in 10th, we have Fiora, which is also a bit risky as I didn't get the most votes from it, but she got an average score of 4.75, placing her as the second highest top overall. Now, what I think is the most fascinating thing here is that the jungle role had the most top 10 champions with 4, while mid lane was the only role that had 0 top 10 champions. So it kind of shows maybe a shift in League of Legends where when I was growing up playing the game like 6 years ago, mid lane was definitely the strongest role, and it definitely seems like it's shifted maybe that jungle is the most OP role. And if you look at pro play, you can see that a lot of the MVPs from finals have been junglers. I mean, sure, last time we had a top laner win it, but in general it has been jungle for a while. You might be asking yourself, Borax the Mighty, you can't really use this project to then determine the strengths of the individual roles, but I think that the role strength does play a big part in how strong people will view their own champion, because if your role is strong, you probably won't think your champion is as strong. So it definitely seems like supports and mid laners feel like their roles are a bit weaker than others, and you can definitely see that come into play again when we look at the individual tier lists of each role. Alright. Now, let's look at the champions that have had a bit of a stinker, and we're gonna go from the 10th worst to the worst champion here. Coming in at 10th place, we have Nasus, who scored a 3.12. In 9th place, we had Vayne, who scored a 3.11. Then we had Morgana, who scored a 3.10. Kassadin, who scored a 3.05, which tied with Braum at also a 3.05. Then we had Vel'Koz, who scored a 3.03. Ryze, who had a 2.94. Then the scores really started to tank, where we have Sivir at a 2.89, but then again there's an asterisk on that as I wasn't able to get the most votes, so just be careful of that. And then finally, we have the 2 worst champions who scored way lower than anyone else, with Corki at a 2.73, who is 0.16 worse than Sivir. And then you think, it can't get any lower than that, but actually it can get a lot worse than that, and a champion I've recently fallen in love with because of this project is Shyvana, who rated 2.53 average score, which is pretty insanely low. I am very amazed by that. So yeah, while jungle had the most champions, she was the only jungler to make the bottom 10, and she was the absolute worst champion rated by her own mains. In fact, you have to go all the way to 16th worst champion to find the next jungler, which was Skarner, who rated a 3.25, which is still significantly higher than Shyvana. Which again shows that jungle might be the strongest role, as they have the most possible champions while only having one in the bottom 15. And again, like I said, supports and mids seem to be a bit stronger because they didn't have a lot of champions in the top 10, and they both had 3 champions in the bottom 10 each. Top laners only had 1 champion in the bottom 10, but their tier list also looks very interesting. Now you might be disappointed that I'm only talking about the top 10 champions and the bottom 10 champions, but let me just say a couple of things. First of all, I'll be making YouTube shorts on every single champion that I was able to get results from. What these YouTube shorts will do is point out some key statistics that I think are interesting if you just want a quick little overview of your favorite champion. Now, I've done a couple of the A tiers and I'm still going. I'll still make these videos. And it's going to take a while because, again, I have to make 156 of these YouTube shorts, so please be patient with me, but eventually I'll have all of the shorts out, and then you'll be able to go to the playlist I see and find your specific champion and see the information there for you. In case you don't want to wait for that, I again will include the Excel sheets in the description, so you can quickly look at your favorite champion, as well as any other champion that you might be interested in seeing. Now, like I talked about earlier, I was able to give these champions rankings, which then let me put them on a tier list, and I believe it's a great way to quickly visualize how strong champions are when you compare them, as well as a great way to see how strong the champion roles are, which is again based on how champion mains feel about everything. Now let's quickly once again look over the overall champion tier list, and it is completely sorted based on how people score them on average. And I think it is quite interesting to see. One thing we can see is that most champions hover around the C+ range, which I think is a good place to be. There's not too many champions near the bottom, there's not too many champions near the top, and that is kind of where I think balance would want to be. I'm getting a little bit sidetracked as I will be going into that more in depth in later videos, as well as anything you guys want to see me dive into. You can already see teasers of that by going to the Excel sheets yourself. We're really going to dive into perhaps looking at the state of League of Legends based on these results, as well as eventually figuring out the BTMS scale and all of that good stuff. So if you're enjoying this type of content, definitely leave it a like, definitely subscribe, as I will be making more and more. Another thing I'll be doing is giving superlatives to champions in the future, so feel free to leave some in the comments below. Some things I'm thinking about are the champion mains who are the most satisfied, the most dissatisfied, the most crazy, the ones who are the most unified in their opinion, the ones who have the most differing opinions, stuff like that, as well as seeing who participated the most. So I've been recently making videos, I think, a little bit too long, so we're going to try and keep this one a little more concise. And we'll end it by just going over each individual role's tier list. Now you might be wondering how I determined the role for each champion, and the way I did that is I used Analytics to see what role they assigned to each champion, and then I used that to put them on each individual tier list. Let's start off by going top lane and working our way down. Now I think top lane is the most fascinating, as they have the second most champions assigned to their role, but they had the most spread out champions in general. As you can see, they have no champions in S+ tier, S- tier, or A+ tier. They seem to have 4 power picks, at least decided by champion subreddits mains, and those were Malphite, Fiora, Ornn, and Olaf. Now I don't know how accurate that is. What is nice about this whole thing is none of my biases, none of my opinions are involved in all of this, but that's what champion mains decided. Then we have like a little middle clump where we have these champions, which are all seem to be fighting champions. Then we work our way down and we get more clumps, and finally we go down to the very bottom where in the F range of champions we only have 3, and those were Tryndamere, Volibear, and Nasus, and no champion was in the F- tier. Now, I'm only talking about this a little bit, but when we do talk about the state of League of Legends using this information, we are really going to try and dive into figuring out what role is the strongest at the moment, based on champion mains' perceptions of the game. Next up, we have the jungle tier list, which has the most champions overall, and as you can see compared to the top lane tier list, they really spread out all of their champions pretty evenly. We have our power picks in Kha'Zix and Gragas, who are literally both getting nerfed in the patch that is coming out live today. Then we have our other S champions, we have our A champions, B champions, C champions, D champions, and then we only have 2 champions in the F range, where we have Skarner in an F+, and we have Shyvana all down there by her lonesome in F-. Then we have mid lane, where we don't have any S+ champions. Like we said before, they didn't have any top 10 champions, and their highest was Annie, who ranked 11th. And then the second highest was surprisingly Pantheon, who ranked all the way down in 17th. As you can see, they only had 3 champions in the S range, a few champions in the A+ range, then it's pretty sparse, then there's some good clumping in the C and D range. Then they actually had the second most F champions overall, and they had the most F- champions with 2 in Corki and Ryze. Next we have ADCs. We really have 3 power picks that stand out in Kog'Maw, Zeri, and Jhin, and Kog'Maw and Zeri are currently getting changed in this upcoming patch. Now, ADCs have the least amount of champions, but I still found it very, very interesting. We have this good clumping of champions in the A tier, then in the B tier we have 3 champions, and in the C tier we only have 1 lone champion in C- tier with Kalista. Then it goes all the way down to D tier, where we have 3 champions, then they have no one in F+, but then down in F range they have 3 champions with Sivir, Ashe, and Vayne, and Ashe and Sivir are both receiving buffs in this upcoming patch. Now to the support tier list, which is one I was the most interested in, as personally that's just the main role I play, and we seem to have 1 power pick in Milio, who's getting nerfed this patch, and just from me playing that champion a couple times in ranked, I definitely think the mains ranked him pretty well. Then the only other S champion we had was Janna, then we had a couple in A tier, a lot in B tier, a fair amount in C tier. Then we go down to D tier, where we can see a lot of the damage mage supports are hanging out there, as well as Vel'Koz and Morgana in F tier. And honestly, if you know anything about me personally, you know that I absolutely hate Morgana to my core. So seeing her all the way down to F tier makes me almost feel bad for the people who play Morgana. But then I remember they're playing Morgana, so I'm kind of okay with that champion being bad. At the same time, I'm a little worried that she might be getting buffed soon, but at the same time I ban her every game, so to me that champion just doesn't really exist. So yeah, there, you pretty much have it. If you have any questions for me, feel free to ask them and I will do my best to answer them. I'll continue to work on this project, but I wanted to share the results before the next patch changes everything too much. If people are interested, I'm going to re-pull the champions who are getting buffed and nerfed this patch to see how the perceptions of those mains have changed after the buffs and nerfs. What I'll do though is wait a week after the buffs and nerfs have happened, as I want people to have time to really experience them before they make their opinions. Also, this time I'll make sure to ask permission, as we'll only have to interact with a few subs at a time and not 163 of them. Again, in the future we'll be making more videos going over the data we have collected, as well as releasing a bunch of shorts related to every champion that participated, so make sure to subscribe if you want to check that out. Finally, thank you to everyone who has participated in these polls or has enjoyed the journey with me so far. Without you all, none of this would have been possible, and I really want to say I super duper appreciate it. And yes, I'm even going to include you, Sean Mains.